Hard, heavy, and hair. Badass music for badass listeners. With Pariah Burke.
I first became aware of Priya Panda when a friend in Toronto gave me a bootleg cassette recorded from a self-pressed CD called In the Rough. And it was definitely rough, lacking the polished production, sometimes overproduction, of other hard rock, metal, and punk acts in 2008. I loved the rawness of it, and the contrast of the hard rock licks and driving drums and the bright, clear vocals sung with a defiant sneer. The singer was Priya Panda. Hearing that record, I decided to keep my ear on this band. So much great music starts in Toronto, but not all of those bands make it. I found myself, honestly, hoping this one would. 4 years later, a WAV file lands in my inbox. It's a song called Get the Fuck Outta Here, which automatically gets my attention, and I play it, and I find a familiar, ringing, clear voice, backed by tighter guitars, bass, and drums, and with much better mastering. I couldn't put that song on the air at the time, just because of where I was in my career, but I ordered a copy of the Bad Pack CD by Diemonds for myself anyway. The next two albums were even better. They were better sounding. Just great music from a band I thought was going to be the next great band. But when I looked for the usual marketing and promotional material from the label, I found, I don't want to say nothing, but let's just say it was inadequate at best. Then comes the third record, the second official release, not counting that self-released EP, and it's called Never Wanna Die, with metal anthems like Ain't That Kinda Girl and Forever Untamed. They had production polish, tight playing, attitude, some of the best hard rock writing of the decade, and Priya Panda's in-your-face, clear-in-your-ear vocals. The record rocks the paint off the walls. I thought this was the album that would push Diemonds to heavy radio rotation, headlining tours, and make little girls everywhere dressed like Priya Panda, much to their parents' dismay. But no, so little promotion, and I had to go looking for the music tracks, which in radio is definitely not the secret sauce of success. It's the opposite. Their label never sent me or any other DJ I know actual tracks from Diemonds for airplay. I aired them on the Hard, Heavy, and Hair show after I spent my own money on their CD, which I was happy to do to support the band. But that's not how radio works, just FYI. As you'll soon hear Priya herself say, the label completely dropped the ball on this band. A band that could have been, should have been, great. They had the writing, the talent, all five of them, but especially frontwoman Priya Panda. And I defy anyone to find a sexier singer up on stage than Priya. Maybe Priya's beauty is why Napalm Records kept sticking Diemonds on the wrong concert lineups, much to the loss of every hard rock and metal fan everywhere. Today, I sat down with Priya Panda to find out what she's been up to since the final Diemonds record in 2018, what Diemonds can do with their most popular album, her recent acting work for Rough Cut, and whether there's a future for Diemonds. Her answers will surprise you. They surprised me, and I'm generally well informed. Priya Panda, thank you very much for joining me here on the Hard, Heavy, and Hair show. Priya Panda, the diamond of diamonds and a solo artist. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing these days.
These days, I'm not really doing what I used to do, which is spend a lot of time on the road. I'm actually spending a lot of time at home, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to over the last couple of years. It's just, we've kind of all sort of switched up our lifestyles, and I guess I'm just trying to stay busy. I have been writing a couple new songs and thinking about recording, but haven't gotten to that point yet. And yeah, just staying busy, going to yoga, exercising, reading, relaxing, hanging out with my pets.
Nice. And on that note, should we introduce your co-guest there?
This is Tiger, everybody. I don't know how long she'll stick around. She's kind of shy, but we'll see.
Hi, Tiger.
She saw that she was on camera and now she's walking away.
Maybe she has to put on her makeup.
Oh, well, she's 18, so, she knows what she likes and doesn't like, I think, at this point.
Ah.
Yeah, she's old and sweet.
So you were saying you're trying to get some recording done, but haven't yet. Recently, so you started out doing a lot of hard rock singing, but lately, the last couple of years, you've been releasing some pop singles, and there's singles that, please take this as the compliment it's meant to be. They sound like they could be top 40 hits in the mid 80s. I mean, straight out of that.
I think that was kind of where my head was at when I was making them and writing them and working with certain producers that could like get that sound for me. So thanks. Yeah.
Who were you working with? What producers?
So the couple of the tracks that I put out initially were made by Dejan Martineau, who actually I did most of the demoing and early songwriting on all the Diemonds albums since the Bad Pack all the way to the last one. So I've been working with him in one way or the other since like 2010 or 9 even, 10. So he's been in my life, and it's funny because he knows me, knows my voice, he knows my strengths and my limitations. So it's really comfortable writing with him, and he brings out, certain things that he knows that I'm good at or stronger at. But I think it's also been challenging for me was working with songwriters that I'd never written with before or even met before. And that's something that I guess when I moved to LA from Toronto, that was a thing that I was doing constantly, was working with people that I may have heard of or known about, but I didn't know them personally. And so I felt it was a different kind of pressure that I hadn't really experienced before. And some cool things came out of it. And so another producer I worked with in that situation was someone called James Doviak. He's really talented. He's from Manchester, United Kingdom, and he's a producer. He works primarily with Johnny Marr, who is the original or the guitar player from The Smiths. So he's produced all his albums and he plays guitar in his band. And so he was somebody that I worked with, and I was feeling a little like you hear all these accolades or things that people have done or worked on, and you're kind of just like, I guess you feel pressurized in this other different way that actually makes you create in a whole different way as well.
Yeah. So you got to stretch a little bit.
Definitely. It's like, I don't know, I guess, what do they call it? Like songwriting with a gun to your head or whatever. It's just kind of like you have a couple of hours with this person, and you kind of have to be kind of decisive and with lyrics and things like that, and just try to flesh something out in a small period of time without feeling reserved, without feeling reservations, which is I've just never done that before, because with Diemonds, it was essentially me and Cece who did most of the writing. So we were very, like comfortable with each other. We were very used to writing with each other. We had a system and a style, and it didn't really, I guess after a certain point, we started bringing in different songwriters just to freshen it up. And so I'd gotten a small amount of exposure, but what I did out here was a whole different ball game for me.
Okay. Did you find it easier or more difficult to switch from the hard rock and metal with a little bit of punk writing into the pop writing? What was your process there?
I feel like I got to explore different topics with the music that I was writing um, after, after Diamonds kind of thing, and I think it just made me kind of be able to explore other kinds of music that I listen to without even bringing in punk or whatever rock elements. I guess there's like guitar, which I love, and I feel like I can't get away from that in most of my songs, but I don't think it was applied in the same way that it was. It's not like riff-based rock music. That's pretty much all I know and all I've worked on, and punk and metal. Um, so this was totally 180 for me, and it was just kind of like drawing from my influences at first, which I'm growing in that sort of world, so my I think I'm hopefully becoming stronger with that and more confident in my ability with it, so it's coming more naturally, and I'm finding a voice within it. I'm not just like drawing from my influences and like regurgitating them. I hope that I'm heading into my own style, and I think for me that's going to be blending the two. um, like when I still have an EP that I've done. I haven't put it out yet, and that's kind of the pop world stuff that I did. It's kind of like dark and poppy at the same time. And I think now what I would like to do is kind of blend that like retro pop sound with like the hair metal and hard rock and metal stuff that I love, and I think that's where I'm headed.
Oh, that's really cool. So the EP you're talking about, is that Snacks?
Yeah, so it's not, yeah, that's the one. So I haven't
Okay.
put it out. I finished it a while ago, so at this point it's on me. I mean, I don't have a label, I don't have a manager, so I don't have a band either, breathing down my neck to get things done and make things happen. So I feel like I'm waiting for the right moment, which works for me, when I'm willing to put together a band and give it my 100%. Because just right now, I guess I'm feeling more like I just want to kind of create and write things in my journal, write lyrics and things like that, as opposed to getting in a jam room with a band and touring these songs. I feel like for some reason, I want to write another record. I think that's kind of the record that I want to tour. Although, I love and appreciate what we came up with that EP. I just also feel like I'm not 100% there yet with like my sound. Like now, I feel after a couple of years have passed since I made it, I just feel like I want to draw in a little bit of that rock element back. And I know why, and I do still want to have a loud and heavy band. It's
Okay.
hard to get away from when you're like a headbanger. I'm sure you can relate.
Oh
And
yeah.
so when I made this album, I was fully intended to, like put together a softer band, maybe play with tracks, which is something that is much more common in the pop world than rock. Like Diamonds never used tracks. You're 100% all real. We didn't have like backups on tape or anything. Like we didn't have keys on tape. It was just what you see is what you get. And I think especially as the later years came through, we were so, I don't know how to say it. It was just like we felt like kind of disillusioned by the fact that all the bands were using tracks. And so um, you start standing out sound wise on a bill when you're the only band that isn't using tracks. And yet it doesn't like really align with our ethos to use tracks. You know what I mean? So we were in that position where we were just kind of like, either do it or don't. We never did. And if we ever play again, we won't ever use tracks, I think. But with this genre, I was kind of thinking about it and stuff. And now I'm like, I kind of just still would want it like a live instrument band, which is a lot like a band like Depeche Mode or something, which is a full band, even though they have a primarily electronic sound. There's every instrument on stage. There's a live drummer and guitar player and bass player, and everyone's, contributing to the sound. It's not just mostly on tape, with a few things like peppered in to, you know, add rhythm. So I think that if I write another album that's more in that vein, I could kind of marry the two things.
Do you mean bring in some tracks or just do it entirely live?
I think do it entirely
Okay.
live. Yeah, that would be ideal. Like I would love to have a keys player and a full band.
All right. So I usually ask this question much later, but um, put together a supergroup around yourself. Tell me,
Man,
who would you put in this band for this next project of yours or whatever you want to do?
I've like never thought about that, but of course I'd want to play with my friends because that is like the hugest, the biggest reason I got into music was it was like a big social thing. It was all of us misfits and crazy people hanging out together. And so, um, I'd probably still have Daniel, who is in Diemonds, in my band because we get along super well and he's my best friend. Um, so definitely him. And then on drum, it's funny because I'm just like, all I want is the guys in my band to be together on this new project with me, which is super unrealistic because I live in Los Angeles and they live in Toronto and I haven't seen them in a while and we haven't played in, a couple of years. But it's funny because that's really who I'd want to play with again. Just because there's so many like memories and like, all that stuff associated with it. So, um, but yeah, I mean, there's all the rock stars, right? Like maybe Jeff Pilson on bass because he's a badass.
Yeah, yes.
On drums, maybe Kenny Aronoff, because
Nice.
he's played on like heavy records as well as like pop, like he's like John Mellencamp's drummer, so he has that super '80s bounce as well. But he also plays with like Steve Vai and stuff, so it's he's got both elements down pat for guitar. I don't know. Ace Frehley, because why
Oh,
not?
wow.
I mean, why not? And then
And you're a huge Kiss fan.
yeah, I'm a huge Kiss fan. I think it would make me nervous playing with Ace at first for sure. But Ace cuz
Yeah, I mean,
in
if you're
his
shooting for the
downtime, in
stars.
his time. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
I mean, maybe Martin Gore from Depeche Mode because he is one of the like I think he's like a master at adding guitar texturally and not it's like not just riffs and rhythms, it's more like sounds and feelings like through the guitar. It's like atmosphere.
All right. Sounds like a really good band.
I'm trying to think of a keyboardist or a synth player. I don't know, maybe like Derek Sherinian or someone. Um, but I don't know a huge amount of keyboard players that I really follow or but yeah, maybe he's super talented, obviously. So
Okay. Um, that is quite a band. Do you do any of the jams in LA?
first of all, let me just be the first to say, couldn't afford that band. I couldn't even barely afford to just, have people come up and come out and show up and play because that's the big difference in LA. Kind of everyone wants to, you know, like be paid for just jamming or putting things together. And it's strange because there's also an art aspect to it and a fun and a camaraderie aspect to it that can often feel like there's a piece of that puzzle missing when everybody's just kind of like in it, you know, to get paid or
Right.
that feeling where everyone's an employee of yours. I don't think I've had that experience, but I've definitely been in that experience and it puts you in a different like position where you're not as like committed or feeling like that band camaraderie and yeah, I think that's kind of what's also kept me from doing it. But sorry, I missed the question or I forgot it.
Oh no, that's okay. Actually, it's fine, but that makes me think, did you have that just hired on experience when you covered Michael Jackson's Beat It with Bumblefoot? Was that what you're
Yeah, like that's a like a great example because I've never even met Bumblefoot. I'm sure he's a great dude and he's super talented, of course, but and I've seen him play, but I don't know him and I don't know him personally. So that was something I wouldn't call that like a hired situation. I call that like something that was really cool and offered to me. And so I thought I saw that more of like a creative pursuit and yeah. But I mean like, you hear about a lot of bands in around around here and other entertainment cities. I presumably that there's like a band built around a certain person and every person in that is an employee, and then if that act gets signed or into that world, it's really only the artist that gets signed and the bands continue to be their employee, and it's more of like a job relationship. And I'm like, I'm old school, and I've had that experience where all my band was, all for one for all. We all lived in the same house at times, like, four of us in a 2-bedroom apartment, like partying for days, just sharing everything, having nothing. Like, I don't think that that's important, like the most important thing in the world to having a band, but I think it adds a lot to the chemistry or something like that. So, not comparing myself to the Beatles or anything, but they did that residency in Germany where they had to like sleep on floors, and they just did pills all the time because their sets were like 8 hours long, and they were like uppers and downers and all those stories of them just hanging out together and jamming and just doing it not only for the money, I'm sure, because there probably wasn't like a ton of it, but it was all about hanging out, getting their chops and having the experience. And I think I just see bands and music that way. So right. So you were saying, do I do any of the jams in Los Angeles? I have. I think they're cool, especially if you want to see or hang out or meet other artists who are out there and playing and stuff like that. But they're not really jams in the way that I see a jam, which is like, hey, anyone here want to sing a whole lot of love? It's like you kind of get the songs in between or like a week before, and they're like, okay, you're playing in between 9:12 and 9:18, and like that, and you invite your friends. You're like, just make sure you're there at 9:10 because I'm on at 9:15 or whatever. And like and then it's interesting because people come and go based on like who's in the room, so it's not really like they're maybe in it for the whole night and stuff. It's like it's just like they're kind of there to see their person, or there's like I don't know, it's just a different vibe. It's been a completely different way of the industry and the like the live music world works here. I mean, like here there's so much even pay to play situations where the opening bands still have to sell tickets and things like that.
Yep.
Which I'm not sure how to feel about that. I just feel like, if bands didn't sell tickets, then that means a lot of the bands that they're selling tickets for wouldn't be able to come to town because maybe they aren't able to sell enough tickets themselves, or their guarantees astronomical. So there's like there's a push and pull there mentally for me where I'm kind of just like, imagine being that poor band having to sell X amount of tickets right now, or making up the difference in cash, which we've been in that position before. And it's horrible. And we've never, ever had to pay out of pocket. We've done it twice. One time we did it when we played in Toronto. We had to open for these bands. I won't mention which, but it was our first time playing at that venue. And it was like, we had just become a band like a couple of years before. So we were still, new or whatever, but we sold tickets, and the agreement was our pay was based on how many tickets we sold. So we ended up selling, so it was like we got $5 per ticket we sold. So he was probably expecting that we'd sell like 20 tickets or something, and we'd get fucked. But the reality is we sold like 500 tickets, and he owed us, like, we basically sold out the venue like ourselves. And then he had to pay us $5 a ticket. He was so fucked. Like we never ever had to sell tickets for him ever again. But the first time we played the Whiskey, we had to sell tickets, and we barely made it to the show because of our van issues and all the stuff. We come to the venue, and during sound check, like Cece, our guitar player, like literally stood outside while all these people were coming to the box office to buy tickets. And this is while we're on tour, so it's like insane for a band on tour to have to sell tickets locally.
Yeah.
In a place still to play, and that is still expected. We were just standing in front of the venue as people were walking to the box office. We'd undercut the box office price by like selling the ticket, but it's like so crazy to like put that on a band, like to have to do just to play. Especially obviously we were able to, if we were living in town, it would have been one thing. But we didn't even live here, and it was a bit shocking. So those are the 2 times we've ever sold tickets.
How long were you in town before the Whiskey gig? I mean, how
We
long did you have to
literally rolled
sell?
up to sound check.
Oh,
In
and you had
between
still had to
sound
sell
check and
tickets.
doors, we had to sell like $1,500 worth of tickets. Like it was psycho.
Wow.
Yeah, which we still took the gig because we were just like, well,
It's the Whiskey.
it was early on in our time, right? Like it's not something we would have done as we came to like gain more experience and get better opportunities. But that's it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard for a band to get off the ground if those are like the expectations surrounding, your ability to like play in front of people.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I have a lot of mutual friends. Some of them are building or trying to bring up new bands now. And I'm watching that happen, with some really good friends of mine that you also know. Brandon Cook, Jeff Buhner, some of the people from Rough Cut, some other bands.
Great dudes.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you, about 18 months ago, Rough Cut released a music video, the only single that this lineup of Rough Cut has done, for Black Rose, and you acted in that video. And you acted, and I don't know if you'd even heard the song beforehand, but you were acting to Stephen St. James' really soulful, ache-filled vocals. How was that experience? How did that come about, and how was it for you?
I guess playing and meeting people. We'd played on the Monsters of Rock cruise with Diemonds, which is 100% recommended experience if you've never done it and love that kind of music. But that being said, on that cruise, you'll basically meet every artist that's on there, if that's what you want to do, and all their managers and all their fans too, because it's pretty, you hang pretty close with people for days, and it's a great experience. And on that, I met their manager, who is a huge Vane fan, which is basically like my all-time favorite band, pretty much. And so he lives in Atlanta or in Georgia, and he hit me up. But of course, there's I didn't even, again, going back to the Bumblefoot song, I mean, I never even met them, or they weren't even in the same room as me, and they don't probably even know what I was doing when I was doing it. I think it was filmed on an entirely separate day, as far as I know. So it's just I kind of saw the finished product as you did, and it was fun. I mean, I'm not really an actress, I admit. I'm not very much, haven't really done that very much in my life, so it was kind of a challenge. And they also made me drive this impossibly expensive fancy car, which pretty much was on my mind the entire time. Like, holy shit, I kind of just moved to LA and have to drive this BMW on the highway, and it was a lot for me. But I'm also from Toronto, so half of my friends and half of the people I know don't even know how to drive, and so it's I'm lucky that I do. The only reason I do is because I toured in a band. So it's driving in LA a fancy car that's not yours while you're being filmed was probably, yeah, it was stressful. But it was fun. I love the way it turned out. It was kind of done at the drummer's house, so he was there actually in his
Dave
yeah, it was
Alford.
fun. I would do more if it came my way, but I'm not really going out of my way to like audition for things or like that's not really my world.
Okay. Um, the your role in that music video made me think of the lyrics to one of your songs, "Take Me Back," maybe from the opposite direction of the same situation.
Yeah, actually when I was shooting that, it was kind of like it kind of was bringing up a lot of kicking up a lot of dust or whatever because I'd been through a situation like that, like not once but twice in my life, and like at that time was still sort of like dealing with the last one. So, like basically what all my songs are kind of about is that situation and how much that affects like the other person who's going through it kind of thing. And so it was interesting playing the other side of that. It was actually kind of weird to get into that character because it's nothing I would ever do in my entire life, you know what I mean? It's just so
Yeah.
foreign to me to like treat somebody that I love that way, I suppose you could say. So yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because I felt it was bringing up like emotions, I guess you could say. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I was using a ring in the video, and the ring was like the lady, I think whose car it was her ring from her like marriage before she got divorced. So it was like there's a lot of like energy there. It was just like okay, like I've never worn a wedding ring or anything either. So or I think it was an engagement ring. I think I didn't even know what hand to put the ring on. So yeah.
Yeah. Not to get too personal, but been I've had that situation. I've been on the receiving end of it, and I could never that kind of a betrayal, that kind of pain. I could never cause that to anybody.
Yeah,
So I
it's
understand.
it's hard if you and it's in like not to put it like lightly for you, but I guess generally a lot of more females I guess have experienced that, and
Yeah.
so often when you talk to males about it, they haven't experienced them themselves. They can't really understand how deep it cuts. So yeah, it's I'm sorry that happened to you because it kind of changes you because
It
when you
does.
have that amount of trust broken, it's like whoa, what else don't I know about my own life is like the questions you start asking.
Yeah. And you can go a couple of different ways afterward. You can stop trusting entirely, or you can just try to be better about your choices, be more thorough in the way you trust. Um, yeah. Not to get all depressing.
It's okay. I mean, it's a reality for so many people,
Yeah.
and I think it's like becomes so much easier to engage in that kind of behavior and disguise it with like apps and other kind of thing that you're kind of like it's almost like you're like the analog world is one life that you have and like your digital life is another like life where you're like texting girls and boys or whatever, like you're basically being dishonest or whatever it is that you're doing. It might not like you kind of can separate it, or I feel like that's what a lot of the couple of people that I went through there was a lot of it was based on like Instagram and Tinder and like all these other things where it was like I don't think they would be able to do that when you're like living with somebody or whatever. It's not as easy if those opportunities didn't present themselves or whatever. So I don't know. It's an interesting experience. Not a good one though.
No. No. So I'm sorry that happened to you as well.
So it's all good. I feel like um I have a different and maybe better perspective on people and the world and psychology. And I'm not saying that I've become bitter or um jaded because of it, but it does it honestly opens your eyes and gives you a different way to assess all information that comes your way.
Yeah. Hopefully you're able to trust these days.
I am. I'm in a relationship now, and it's great, and I'm very happy. So yeah,
Well, good. I'm glad
yeah.
to hear that.
Thank you.
So let's completely switch tacks and go to something a lot more fun.
Okay.
So, as part of Diemonds, you've played Rocklahoma several times. You've toured in support of Slash, Sebastian Bach, Megadeth, Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Steel Panther, which must have been an experience. Who was your favorite to work with?
Um, I mean, they're all great, and it's hard to say. I think the person that I've had, or the camp or the world that has had the most meaningful, like personal connection, has been like Sebastian Bach, um, and his band and his family and stuff, because he's Canadian. We live out here. Um, I'd see him a lot and whatnot, and his wife's fantastic, and his kids are great. So that was so cool. I can't believe I'm saying that. Like, this is Sebastian Bach from Skid Row. Like, I had that band's um, poster in our jam space and on my wall and all that stuff. And so it's like those kind of things that are like super surreal about this industry and this world. But I think, yeah, I mean, uh, I think a lot of the bands like that you were saying that were coming up are sort of like where I feel that I think they're my favorite, because they can relate to what we're going through, and driving in a van for hours just to play like 35 minutes or 40 minutes opening for another band or whatever, and maybe not having a dressing room or a hotel room or all that kind of stuff. I just feel like those are my favorite bands, like the bands like The Wild or One Bad Son, or like they were out doing what we were doing while we were doing it. So it's cool to see them still doing it, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Any interesting tour stories other than, having to sell your own tickets at the whiskey?
I don't know how interesting that was. I think it's more of a cautionary tale, but kind of maybe that's all the stories that I have to tell you, because um, when you choose this life, it's a different life. But man, I guess one of the classic stories is Rocklahoma for us. It's like the reputation for that story like precedes us, where I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I blame alcohol big time. But also, we were all very wasted, and Rocklahoma was crazy. And what ended up happening, and I'm not sure how, is maybe because we were partying, but at the end of the night, they lock everybody in Rocklahoma, even if they want to leave after a certain point, because there's a campground, so you can camp. But we had a hotel room, and it was whatever time at night. It might have been like 5 or 4 in the morning, and I think we had to play that night in the campground just for fun, because they have like crazy, like they have stages set up there, and it's like unofficial party time. And I think our set was at, like, if I'm not mistaken, 3 a.m. So
Okay.
I think we played, and then after we had to leave, and we ended up drinking for a couple hours instead of just leaving. And then it got to the point that we were locked in. So Cece, tour manager extraordinaire, decided, I can't even, like, it's crazy to think that we ever would have done this, because it was 11 years ago, but he decided to drive the van through the fence and hope that it would kind of open. And I mean, instead, what really happened is it kind of like V'd, and then like a piece of it like smashed into the hood of our car, or of our van. And then we were just like, you fucking idiot, like this is insane, what's wrong with you? And like, yet I mean, I think that was just me, because everybody else thought it was hilarious or something, because we were that drunk. But yeah, that's one of our crazy stories, and pretty much every booker, promoter, and whatever at Rocklahoma knows about it. It's probably why we've never played there again. But
Did they
whatever.
make you pay for the fence?
Um, no, because we didn't do it right, right? I don't know. Maybe I've already, it's been too incriminating. I shouldn't have put it on video, but it's too late now.
Well, hopefully the statute of limitations has run out on that. So you recently tweeted, and this is why I reached out to you. You recently tweeted about selling the last of Diemonds merch. And you said something else very shortly after that about how your record company always thought Diemonds was Motley Crue or one of, I forget who else you mentioned. It's a
It was
couple
like
other
Steel
bands.
Panther, Poison, and Motley Crue. They made a
Yeah.
house sticker on our album, and I think that, I mean, I'm not sure if people who bought our album were expecting us to sound like Steel Panther, because like we don't, and so I'm not sure. Yeah, there was a lot of, I think we had a hard time fitting in with anyone, because if it wasn't those kind of bands that they're kind of trying to put us on with or whatever, they were either trying to put us on with like symphonic female fronted metal bands just because they had a female singer, or the
Talk about a
two.
label mismatch.
I agree. There'd be all kinds of bills that we played where it was all symphonic metal and stuff like that, because there's a lot of female voices in that genre, and they're
Yeah.
great, but I don't think we necessarily fit in with a bill like that. But the other bands were always Hailstorm or Pretty Reckless, which they're great bands or whatever, but again, I don't think we sound like either of them either. So there was always a problem figuring out who we should tour with or what we should do, and I think maybe that's why we didn't do any of it. It was always like a bit of a standstill with um, I don't know when did a lot more touring when we weren't signed. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we didn't have a booking agent, when we didn't have labels and all those voices and like cooks in the kitchen, all that stuff. We toured when we wanted to. We booked our own tours. We played with bands. It was like it wasn't the kind of growth or exponential growth that a label's looking for. That was more like taking it to the streets and playing to maybe a small room and like knowing by the end of the night, everyone in the rooms, the 40 or 50 people that are there, they love you for life. And um, I think that's something that we didn't skip, but we also didn't get to the next level. We were like supporting all the big hard rock bands or anything. Like I don't think that ever really came to be. But as
That's
for
a
the
shame.
merch, yeah, I mean we're not playing right now, so I don't really think there's any necessity to print merch, like t-shirts and stuff. I don't know. I just don't think that. I think that's like an more of like, I don't even know how to say it. I think that would be just to feed my ego or something, as opposed to just um, you know, giving people like the people who want something. So I think more in that realm, like I'd rather press more music, because that's the most important thing to me, not like t-shirts and underwear and like fanny packs and baseball caps and all those fun things that we did do. I just think that if um if we printed more music, which we have in for Never Wanna Die, which when we were signed to Napalm, we can't release that music, which sucks, because I think that's what most people would want or want us to repress or have access to, um, if we were to sell it. So I
There's
don't know.
no
We'll do
rights reversion clause for you?
no. Um,
Oh.
yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff that happens when you don't really know what you're doing, and most artists and stuff don't really know what they're doing. So
Yeah.
um and that's kind of where labels and people, managers and things like that, can be very predatory. You know they don't, a lot of labels and things like that don't really promote your music, and then they'll fault you, or bring you out on tour or give you any opportunities, but then they'll fault you for your sales. For us, we were faulted, but when Napalm dropped us, they literally cited the clothes that we wore on our album cover and our album cover as one of the big reasons that it didn't sell. And it's like, well, okay, fair.
On
That's what
on
you think.
Never Wanna Die?
Yeah, Never One Die, because the album cover has like is like I guess they were like, well, people expect you to be super heavy. You guys look like a thrash band, and I'm like, okay, sure,
Okay, I
if
can
that's
see
what
that.
you think, that's cool. But also, you approved all our artwork before you pressed all of this stuff. So to bring this up 2.5 years later, it doesn't really like have any weight. You know what I mean? You had the chance to intercept this. So then I'm like, everything always comes back to, I'm like, did you guys ever listen to the songs? Because you said that we sounded like Steel Panther and that you didn't like our artwork because of X, Y, and Z. But it's not. All of those things were preventable, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like you did anything that was a surprise. It all went through them.
Yeah, like that's the thing with the label. You kind of don't have the last, or we didn't in our situation have the last um, say in everything. So, or like not the final say anyway. So we could present ideas, but in the end, we required approval, and that goes with all of our artwork, all of the songs on our album, the picture that we used of ourselves, and all these bullshit things that were cited to us later. And I was just kind of like, well, you never, we weren't able to get on tour in Europe in 2.5 years, and you guys are like, a label that's kind of out in that side of the world, and so I'm not blaming them because whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of bands that have had great success with them, and that's fine. I just I think for us, we were always a DIY band, and when we started stepping away from that, that was our to our own detriment. Like once we started getting signed, we were like, okay, well, we're waiting for our label and our UK tour manager and all that stuff to offer us a tour instead of doing all the proactive stuff that we did for years, because we just were like, we'll let them kind of do what they're doing because obviously they know what they're doing. Like they're not just emailing 500 people and hoping that they respond, which is like, the kind of stuff that we did for years. They have these contacts. They know the bands. They know their managers. Like we'll just hang out and and it never really happened for us. And then it was like, well, you guys never toured here, and it's like, well, the booking agent never booked us. And then it's like, you guys didn't offer us this, and we're like, we didn't book anything for ourselves, and it was just like a bit of a mess. I feel like there
Yeah.
was no real guidance. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there might be hope. When you said that you didn't want to print new merch, you didn't say because the band is over. You just said because we're not putting out new music right now. And you were talking about mixing your pop work with some heavier and having Diemonds be your band again. So
I mean, I
is the
feel like if you heard our last Diemonds record, I feel like that's where the band kind of, in terms of like that band, that we finally found like what our sound should be, and we stopped kind of just like ripping off every other band that we liked, or I don't know, borrowing or emulating or whatever you want to call it, right? We were just kind of like, okay, this is our like kind of our style, and I think that we found it, and that's why we named our our EP or our album after, it was like a self-titled.
Yep.
I don't think we had ever had the right album for that before, and so I think that that would be the most, melodic and um, poppier like sounding album that we had. Although it was heavy too, it was like almost like more like you know like heavy and like kind of, I don't know, it was heavy but super poppy and melodic, and I think that that was something that we had aimed for from the beginning. And so I think I think this would be a blend of where almost that was headed right at the end to, and plus bringing in what I'm doing now, but I just want shredding guitar solos on everything. I did a bunch of music like that with, oh, I won't. I can't. I guess I can't really mention who he was, but he's from a big '90s band, like a huge '90s band that was on all the radio and TV stations back in the day. And we did a project that was pretty much like that. It was kind of like Sisters of Mercy meets like Rat. We did 3 songs. It was super. I loved it, but of course, touring's back now, and everyone's very very busy. if they're like a legacy act and things like that. So that was kind of put on the back burner until, everybody kind of levels out with their time and stuff. But I think that too was headed also more in that direction where it still has that like guitar element to it, but it still has synths. So.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get to see that project soon.
Yeah, that would
or
be
hear
awesome.
it.
'Cause it's fun. I think I like the tracks that we came up with. So.
All right. So where can people find you? What's your social media? What are you up to these days? Where can they catch you?
My social media is Priya Panda XO for most everything. And Diemonds is Diemonds, and I don't really check those as much anymore or go on them, but I'm pretty active on my personal socials, and you can hit me up, chat. The place that I probably engage the most and write the most is Twitter, just because there's a cool community on there, and it's all I really talk about is music and records and rock and roll, and so yeah, it's not really that personal. It's not super everything I'm up to or what I ate for breakfast or anything, but it's more I guess it's like a rock community. We talk about vinyl and our favorite bassist or our favorite album by Cheap Trick or like these kind of things, and I feel like it's really fun for me because I love rock and roll music, and I love like-minded people, and I think they live mostly on Twitter. So Facebook's a little dry and everybody's complaining too much, and then Instagram is all pictures, and so Twitter's like a discussion where it's not super involved, and yeah, it's fun. It's just lighthearted.
All right. And I do follow you on Twitter. I've seen your Twitter feed, and it is a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Priya Panda, thank you very much for joining me on the Hard, Heavy, and Hair show.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Remember, to hear the music discussed in this interview, stream the on-demand Hard, Heavy, and Hair show at pariahrocks.com.
That's PARIAHROCKS.com.
Also hit pariahrocks.com to stream or listen on a radio station near you. The regular 2-hour Hard, Heavy, and Hair show with me, Pariah Burke. Hard, Heavy, and Hair is your weekly dose of hard rock, heavy metal, and hair bands from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 20-teens, and today, including the latest new releases, your old favorites, and deep cuts and rare hair, along with rock news and trivia.